Data types are not defined in GameMaker. You cannot define a Boolean. You can use 0, 1, or true, false. It will. It doesn't do anything. None of this matters in this language.
Now, to reconcile the fact that he used a Boolean in his code with what he said, I decided to do what any developer would do, and that is I consulted the documentation. So if you go to data types in GameMaker, oh, look at that.
I'm gonna trigger all the coders, programmers. Good luck.
What is up, guys? Coding Jesus here. Guys, today we will be doing a code review of a popular YouTuber and streamer by the name of Thor.
Code review.
PirateSoftware. Now, why should you care, and who the hell is Thor? Well, Thor has been the talk of the town as of recently, as he's been an
Guys in your YouTube chat. Oh yeah, Coding Jesus. I think we have seen him sometimes.
extremely large streamer that has come out against a pro-consumer movement in the gaming space called Stop Killing Games. Stop Killing Games is an initiative launched by a man named Ross Scott, who is an advocate for consumers in the video game space. The purpose of Stop Killing Games is to prevent publishers from revoking access of games from people who have paid to play those games. There are plenty of examples out there of publishers that produce games that require online access to play, but once they pull the plug from their servers, consumers now stop having access to those games. The Stop Killing Games movement is looking to advocate on behalf of consumers in order to mandate that game publishers and game developers have some sort of end-of-life plan for games such that they can continue to be played after the developer would like to stop supporting them. To me, that makes total sense. It doesn't sound fair and isn't right for you to be sold a game as a good, but for it to effectively be a service with an unknown expiration date that the company can not support at any time. Okay, now what?
If I was a spite-based company, I would just build like some exploit into all of my post-life server shit. And then as soon as like the post-life, like when you end service for a game and then you release it to the public, you just like also like leak the exploit onto some forum like the day after. And now it doesn't get patched anymore. It's like, oh, sorry, get fucked.
Why am I picking on
I'm just kidding, don't do it.
Thor here in particular? Well, Thor has not only what appears to be lied about his experience, or at the very minimum, played it off as something that it's really not. But he's also misrepresented the initiative and has doubled and tripled down in that misrepresentation.
If you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, I can't agree with you, and I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. This is not up. No, I will not be supporting the initiative. Stop Killing Games.
This is a response and follow-up from Jesus. I'm 2 minutes into this 13-minute video. Why are you spamming his response when I haven't even gotten through this video? Chill, calm the down. Holy shit.
Cryptically wishing for the movement to fail.
So I'm going to be honest with you. I hope that your initiative gets everything you asked for, but nothing you wanted.
I don't know why you do that, but he decided to do so. He doesn't even have to agree with the movement. He just needs to admit that he misrepresented it. Now, other creators have reviewed this drama to no end and have gone over his employment history and timeline. But what I want to do that I guess would make this video unique is go over his actual code from his developer live streams and analyze whether this guy has the skills that he claims he has as a 20-year veteran and game developer working for Blizzard and other game publishers, etc.
My name is Jason Thor, also known as PirateSoftware Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I am my own studio, PirateSoftware, my same name, it's an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now.
Now, why should you guys listen to me about any of this? Well, I'm a C++ developer with 5 years of experience in the quantitative trading space. I've read dozens of books on C++ and over half a dozen books just on C++ design, from influencers in the space to professors to people that also have YouTube channels to time-tested and trusted books. I've read a lot, and while I'm not an authority in C++, I'm pretty likely to be somebody that can suss out a bad practice if I see one. At least I hope. I also have a bunch of open source contributions in C++ on projects that I find interesting, like Monero. Now, when I was making notes for...
Okay, just to be clear, Thor's background isn't really relevant to whether or not his arguments are good or not, unless he made an argument like, oh, trust me, I'm a huge programmer, so I know that I'm right. Like, there are arguments on the other side of the Stop Killing Games thing. I'm pretty sure. I haven't read the whole Stop Killing Games website. I don't know, maybe they have the counter arguments and everything. Like, it probably would cost companies a little bit more, and there might be a little bit of burdensome stuff in somewhere. I think that it's dramatically over-exaggerated on that side, on Thor's side, but you can't just say like, oh, he's a shit programmer, therefore all of his arguments are retarded. Also, I know everything about game design because I read a lot of books on C++, but I don't know. We'll see. Not to say that he's necessarily wrong in anything so far, but we'll see.
For this video, because I like to come prepared, I thought I need to go through dozens of different developer streams. But what I found out really quickly is that I can only find 2 developer streams that Thor actually brings up code on the screen in. And in those developer streams, he, one, does not actually do any coding. The code is just visually there on the screen. And 98% of the actual stream is him looking at his subscribers, looking at his tip jar as to how much money people have sent him, and also looking at videos about games, but never actually doing any game development in his dev stream. Without further ado, let's actually take a look at some of his code. All right, so I'm going to be linking these VODs in the description box below. I recommend people actually download these VODs before he takes them down, because honestly, if I was claiming I'm a game developer with 20 years of experience, this would be embarrassing to have online. Let's take a look at what's really wrong about this. And I don't even need to be a game dev to understand that. When you look at the code here, what do you see? You see a lot of magic numbers. That's an industry term for numbers that don't have any description or explanation as to what they are or why they exist. And you also have a lot of true or false, which is not descriptive at all. When you look at any function call as another developer, you should understand what's going on without needing to read through the implementation of the actual method itself. So part type sprite, part type size, I don't need to read through that to understand what's being passed to it. and what it's doing. But that's not what's going on here. I shouldn't need to ask myself, what is this number 1? What is the 0? What does it signify, right? Imagine we have a car object, and I create the car object by passing in 96, 4, false, false. Do you have any idea about what those numbers mean? How I'm initializing that car? You don't. A step above that, a better alternative would be to specify in words what 96 means. For example, unsigned 32-bit integer horsepower equals 96.
Is this the level of, is this what we're going to do right now? Is we're going to criticize what he named his, I don't even know what the fuck these are, functions, and if he commented his code enough? Is that what we're doing right now? Is that, I don't know. Maybe it is. Okay.
6. Number of doors equals 4. Is automatic equals false. Is electric equals false. And then pass that into the construction of car. That is the bare minimum. That's what I would expect out of an intern that's fresh out of school. Taking that a step further, you can implement a concept called strong typing, which is the most expressive form of instantiation. What we can do in that case is define an alias at the bare minimum or a class, and we can call it horsepower. And then we could create an enumeration for things like transmission or fuel. And then
the function names aren't the problem. It's the variable passed in the function being implicitly understood by the reader. Is this like a project that he's working on with other people, or is this just like a personal, I don't know like how big this project is. Is this just like a personal thing he does for himself? Because like, I imagine the standard that we would have for this is going to be significantly different. If this is like a small game that he's just like launching himself that he never plans to update or anything like that, versus if he's working on a bigger project with other people, I don't know if it matters as much, but.
Alter the car's constructor and pass in that information. Horsepower 98, door number 4, transmission automatic, fuel gasoline. You don't need to be a game developer to know that that's a lot more maintainable than whatever Thor has here. Another really good example of that is at 2556. So if we jump there, okay, right here. Alarm 0, alarm 1, door number or fuel, bare minimum typing, which is the most expressive form of instantiation. What we can do in that case is define an alias at the bare minimum or a class, and we can call it horsepower. And then we could create an enumeration for things like transmission or fuel. And then we alter the car's constructor and pass in that information. Horsepower 98, door number 4, transmission automatic, fuel gasoline. You don't need to be a game developer to know that that's a lot more maintainable than whatever Thor has here.
Okay.
Another really good example of that is at 2556. So if we jump there, okay, right here. Alarm 0, alarm 1, alarm 2. What is that? What are those alarms? Is it an alarm for person A, an alarm for whatever character, an alarm to do what? It's unexpressive. It's really spaghetti code, in my opinion. Okay, let's go to around 1 hour and 4 minutes. This is also a complete mess for a couple of reasons. First of all, Thor is using the incorrect data types. This isn't even getting to some sort of advanced design or design pattern. It's showing a complete lack of understanding how to represent information in a program. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, look at question asked equals 0. Question asked, in my opinion, is true or false. Has this question been asked? It should be a Boolean data type. What does 0 mean? Booleans are represented as integers under the hood. So in C++, anything that isn't 0 is true. So 1 is true. But why would you even give another developer the option to write question asked equals 42? In theory, that should be true because anything other than 0 is true. But why even allow somebody to write code that can potentially be that confusing? It's just a no-go. Another thing here that I noticed is the absurd amount of comment.
Can you give a breakdown for someone who isn't as well-versed in coding as you? Let me explain what's happening here. Guy in the top left is a cuck who contributes to open source projects constantly and wants credit for what he's written and wants other people to be able to work on it. Bottom right guy is a Chad developer that knows that the only way that job security is going to be guaranteed in his industry is if he's the only one who can read anything in his project. And he knows that if he were to implement this naming scheme, he could be replaced at any point in time. So top left is unemployed loser. Bottom right is AAA dev Chad. Okay.
Most of the time, you don't need to write comments in your code. That's because your code should be self-documenting. But there is a 1 to 5% case rate in which you should be writing comments only if your code is extremely complex. And that's not the case here. This is a simple if statement and a simple switch statement. You don't need to add comments here. Having a comment for we have asked the question and question asks equals 1 is totally superfluous, a waste of time.
There could be reasons Thor does some of these things that are revealed with more context. Oh, maybe. I don't know. I don't actually know anything about programming, so I would never be able to tell you. Like, I don't know if maybe like an IDE, if you like hover over something, maybe it automatically displays shit that makes this obvious anyway. Or maybe this is like really bad practice. Or maybe it's one of those things where it's like, because there's good practice, there's bad practice, but there's also like ideal practice, which is like what would like the perfect code look like, and it gets abandoned I think like 2 days into every project ever. So but I don't know like how, like these might be really legitimate criticisms, they might be not really that important, or they might be totally meaningless. I don't know. I can't say.
Time, a waste of space. I'm not sure why it was added. If not just to waste time on a dev stream, to spend more time pretending you're coding than watching videos. Okay, let's take a look at his second stream because the rest of this stream is reviewing other games, looking at his subscription count. I don't know why he gets so horny looking at this. Watching video games, etc. You guys get the point. Storyline array number. Oh my God. Here he appears to be storing a timeline of events in a flat one-dimensional array with random numbers as the indices in order to represent said event. So literally anything would be an upgrade over what is written here. For example, what he could have done is created a nested structure.
It's funny, if you don't care, knowledge, probably comment on it, because I can pick up more memes, and then I can use my internal Markov chaining thing to trigger the fuck out of software people in my chat.
Where all those default values, instead of being hard-coded and written in some file, can simply be stored in a YAML or configuration file that can be edited outside of the build, as to not waste time rebuilding the entire application, in a YAML or XML format. That's what is written here to represent said event. So literally anything would be an upgrade over what is written here. For example, what he could have done is created a nested structure where all those default values, instead of being hard-coded and written in some file, can simply be stored in a YAML or configuration file that can be edited outside of the build, as to not waste time rebuilding the entire application, in a YAML or XML format. That's development 101. You learn it in the first week of your new job as either an intern or a junior developer. What's even worse is he now also needs to remember what 419 means. So somewhere in his code, he needs to actually add a comment or something to represent what 419 is. As you can see here, I found the file that contains all these events, which are the association between a magic number and some state. It's very obvious that this can get very unwieldy extremely quickly. As you can see here, he has some number associated with 0, 1, or even 2, and then he needs to detail in a comment what that means. Now, imagine a developer accidentally puts 2 here or 3. Finding, tracking, and solving that bug is really going to be a development nightmare. What if you forget to type 3 here and accidentally type 2 and start associating coffee cold knowledge with floor 2 coffee age? Or even worse, in your code somewhere, instead of typing 213, you type 214, and now need to go back and track why your game is misbehaving. This is extremely poor practice and can get very messy very quickly. Not only that, but this is going to significantly decrease the velocity of your development because you're going to need to jump between the storyline vars file, find the event you want to reference somewhere else. And
like the reason also why I don't like, it's hard to say like whether what's okay or not. I remember that there was, I think the source or partial source was leaked for the fucking card game. What was it called? What was the create Balatro or whatever? Balatro, I think. Balatro or Boltero? I don't know. Balatro. And the whole fucking programmer community came out and like shat on how this guy had like individually defined stuff or whatever. And I think it wasn't until one actual like game developer came out and had this whole post where he's like, actually, there's a really good reason why, like if you have unique classes that aren't continually modified or changed in each, like you would probably define everything like this. Like this might not be standard practice in like a large project that you'd ordinarily work on, but for a video game, like you would probably, so I don't know, like this might be dog shit. It might be fine. I just can't say. I don't have any background experience in any of this, so.
Code and go back to that line that you like to reference the event in. So you're going to constantly need to be jumping between files, forgetting, potentially missed.
But I also like my guess would also be that if this is like a personal project for you that you just like enjoy working on, and then eventually you're going to, you know, like compile and ship and that's it. You don't ever plan on like updating it or doing anything else with it. Then I mean, like it's better to ship something at the end of your huge project than to learn how to program. Like if Thor started this learning how to program, and then every time you learn like a new way to structure your code, or you learn some new thing that you refactor over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and then you have nothing. But I don't know, maybe Thor claimed to have a ton of experience before going into this. Maybe he is working with other devs on this. Maybe he does want to update it in the future. And so these are all really good reasons why this code should be more maintainable. So
and go back to that line that you like to reference the event in. So you're going to constantly need to be jumping between files, forgetting, potentially mistyping, and it's just a recipe for disaster. When it comes to the nested structure though, tell me what you think is better, what Thor has here or what I have on screen, which in my opinion is much more expressive. Now this goes beyond simply liking code better. What I have on screen is objectively better because it makes it harder for you and others to make mistakes, and it's a lot clearer as to what's going on. I don't even need to know how this game is designed to understand that whatever he's doing here is not optimal. I also don't need to recommend the most optimal data structure because literally anything would be better than this. Another thing that's really, really weird is that he's using these numbers to represent people. And now everywhere he writes the number 1 when it represents a person, he needs to remember that it's Shelly, which is presumably a game character. Imagine removing all these comments. Would you, as a newly added game developer to his game project, have any idea that 1 is Shelly? You would have no idea. This would never, ever be allowed in a production repository. And like I've been hinting, it's below what you'd expect of a bottom tier intern. One way to improve this is to write case and then switch on an enumeration. So case character Shelly. That is way, way better to whatever he has here. Another example is at 159. More magic numbers, 32. What is message?
The real reason why people shit on Thor for anything that that is when it's wrong or optimal. When it's wrong or optimal, Jesus. It's Thor's giant ego and condescending attitude that triggers the ever-living shit out of people. I agree with that. I think he's a really triggering person. and I can understand why people would fight with him over it. That makes sense. But you have to be careful not to carry it over into every, like when people were like shitting on Tim Pool's band or whatever. I'm like, it's like a fine song. If you're into like, it sounds to me like any 2000s alt rock that I would have listened to. Like people get unhinged. Not to say maybe these are fine criticisms. I don't know. I can't tell you.
What does message 65 mean? What does message 97?
I'll have a better response for you by tomorrow because I'm sure Kelly will review all of it. And with her, she's probably a programmer as well. She'll be able to tell us what's good or not good.
More magic numbers, 32. What does message 32 mean? What does message 65 mean? What does message 97 mean? And what are these dialogue options 2, 5, 6, 0? This is a culmination of my past couple of comments, all in one steaming pile of. Surprisingly, that is all the code that I can find in these game developer streams.
This is the game that I worked on, so hard on. Now understand that before I send you this link, do not buy my game.
Okay. Apparently, PirateSoftware responds.
Hello, I have a development on the Stop Killing Games campaign. Now, as I mentioned,
7 minutes.
And talked a lot of shit. What was wrong? Jesus can help you. You mean the guy who's never used GameMaker Studio, doesn't know GameMaker language, and talked a lot of shit. What was wrong? Pretty funny. Should look at my comment underneath this video. Imagine screaming and shitting about alarms in GameMaker saying, why aren't these renamed when you literally can't rename them? Wild behavior. It's just another like YouTube grifter trying to fight for relevance, dude. That's all that shit is. All too common these days. And you saw that one very strange? Yeah, it's nuts, dude. You can still use alarms by for loop instead of manually setting all to 0 with 8 lines. Those are set to 0 because it was ending the alarms. By setting them to 0, you're actually setting the alarm to off. You would know that if you've ever used GameMaker. And that wasn't all of the alarms, it was some of them.
Wait, what is GameMaker an IDE, or is GameMaker like its own kind of pseudo language to create games in, or what is GameMaker? It's a game engine. Okay. Oh, it's a whole engine with its own language. Okay. I guess I shouldn't say pseudo language because it would just be its own language. Okay.
So
his code was objectively bad. I feel like when you're talking about code, you got to be careful. I mean, like, hey, if it compiles and if it does what you want it to do, I mean, is it bad code? Hey, if it does what it's supposed to do with no problems.
There'd be no reason to set that to a for loop. Can't see your comment? Did he delete it? That'd be even funnier. Oh, you deleted the comment? That would be even funnier. That was still there. Yeah, I wrote this underneath this video. I said, it's clear you've never used GameMaker before based on your comments. Here's a quick rundown for you. Sprite Spark is not a magic number. It's a direct reference to an asset file called Sprite Spark. This is how GameMaker allows you to link sprites and other assets. When you want to use a sprite, sound, or other object, you call it by name. The functions you call that are part type create are built in, allow you to define a particle. The functions below this directly reference different aspects of this particle effect. These cannot be modified, but they can be wrapped, but this wouldn't be a
That depends a lot on the language and engine, if it handles memory for the user or not. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it 1997 and we're still allowing programmers to decide how to allocate memory? Dog, we haven't done that shit for over a decade, okay? You don't even know what RAM is. Let's be real, okay?
efficient. Having them exposed as normal allows you to modify existing particles dynamically, meaning in runtime, while the effect is running. Changing this just creates layers of obfuscation without improving usability or performance. Alarms are internal to individual objects and only reference that same object that they're inside of. When you see alarm 0, it's hitting the alarm 0 on the left side of the object there. We cannot rename these as they are I try to put tied to the object they are placed in. Cool typo. Setting an alarm 0 causes that alarm to stop. Think of this as a timing or delay function. Data types are not defined in GameMaker. You cannot define a Boolean. You can use 0, 1, or true, false. It will. It doesn't do anything. None of this matters in this language. The array of the save file is to create a workable structure for reverse engineers trying to solve the ARG behind the game. It also saves this out in the exact same order in the save file. You can read about the ARG here. It's just a bunch of disingenuous arguments put up in bad faith trying to make me look like a bad programmer. And in reality, this guy has never used the engine that I'm working in, never used the language that I'm working with, and all of his points are moot as a result. You know, basic internet bullshit.
The game is buggy. Resident DGG or Gappy V had a viral clip of it. I don't know if the memory thing I made was true or not, by the way. I have no idea if that's true. That was a meme. Okay. I'm sorry.
Is this part of the game? Is it? Go on, continue. Lock to the gear icon. Continue.
Oh, we watched this a long time ago.
Somebody clip this. Somebody clip this cat. This can't be real. This can't be real. Chat, I can't refund this game. Please help. I can't click anything.
Cutting Jesus released a 15-minute video reviewing you. Do you see it by any chance? Yeah, and I wrote a gigantic comment on it. We actually just went over it. Cutting Jesus obviously has never worked in GameMaker Studio or with...
The alarm function Thor uses are FPS locked. You remember from your ChatGPT, that's what we should use? Oh, we should be using loop cycle systems. I don't remember what it was called.
GameMaker language, and he made a bunch of wild assumptions about the language and things that should be changed or shouldn't be changed. And it's very clear he doesn't know what he's
Delta
talking about.
time.
So I put a large comment underneath this, but it got buried in the myriad of other comments that you can see here. So if you want to screenshot that, you can go and read it yourself. We just went over it on stream. I don't want to do this all stream, to be honest with you. But yeah, he's obviously never worked in this language, ever. So even down to like weird stuff, like why are alarms named this way with magic numbers? They're not. They cannot be changed. The engine won't allow you to. Yeah. Very cool. What's the language you said? GML?
Okay, I'm not trying to say anything because I don't program or I don't know anything at all, okay? But isn't it a little bit like, somebody can tell me, I don't know if they're a game does it here. Isn't it a little bit like Babby's first thing if you're working in some kind of like custom like combo like IDE plus compiler plus its own unique kind of like little babby language, and you're not working in like a conventional, or is that really common in game development? Okay, not that there's anything wrong or bad with that. So I've worked in GameMaker for years. It still doesn't have auto garbage cleanup for everything. Services, for example, still need to be destroyed by the user. It's complete ass. I don't know what service means, but okay.
ML. It's called GameMaker language. It is built in for GameMaker. GameMaker does not allow you to use other languages. So as a result of this, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's bitching about it is not changeable inside of GameMaker. Yeah.
Somebody said yes, but there were a number of successful games made from those. Okay.
Which, you know, I would expect a little bit better from someone named Coding Jesus.
Ooh.
But I've got the ego, right? Very cool. Is he a web dev or something? I have no idea, but he clearly doesn't know this language. You can review languages, many concepts are transferable.
Destiny, you can argue code is suboptimal and inefficient. Meanwhile, the code doing what it is supposed to do right, with how Pirate presents himself on his code being suboptimal seems reasonable, right? Well, you have to be careful. When you say like something is suboptimal, now maybe programmers use these terms more precisely, but something can be suboptimal and that there might be a better way to write something that is more maintainable, meaning can you go back at it, look at it, and kind of intuitively understand what's being written, rather than go back, look at it, and go, okay, I think it was 4 a.m. when I wrote this, and I was super fucking pissed off on my 7th fucking cup of coffee and my 100th milligram of Adderall, and I think I wanted this to refer to this other thing here, and I have to go and check and see what, right? That's like the maintainability is, I think, basically like how easy is it to look at, and then to understand what you wrote, and then to change if you need to, and there might be some modularity or some other thing. How easy can you add to something? I don't know, maybe that. But that's like how easy is it to work with the code, but that's a lot different than does it run perfectly, right? Like technically the most beautifully maintained code base in the world with everything commented and named correctly should run just as efficiently as the most dog shit maintained, or the horrible naming conventions. All of your things are just named 1 through 1 million and you write whatever, like it all compiles the same. But if you are, so I mean, it depends on what you mean by, like, is it good code or not? It depends on the context of what you're talking about, I guess, right?
Steps can be transferable, but specifics are not, and that's the problem. This person called out a bunch of specifics as they would in another language that are not correct in this language.
Oh, sorry. But there are also, my guess is for programming stuff, there's also like, there are things that you can do that are probably just like objectively worse things, right? Like if you're trying to evaluate some variable, like somebody said earlier that you can set something as true or false. If instead like you're assigning a number, there might be a way that you could, like some way that you can determine whether or not a statement is true or false, but you can do it in different ways, and some ways might be a little bit more resource intensive than other ways. And so that would be like, even though you could theoretically write 2 different sets of code that will do the same thing, one is actually less efficient and less optimal than the other code. But that doesn't have to do with naming schemes necessarily. That has to do with the actual like functionality of the language or whatever that you're working on.
That are not correct in this language. So no, you cannot code review correctly in a language you don't know. To be fair, you haven't seen the array, but it was the one solution you thought of off the top of your head. It's
about efficiency of development time. There's a part of why the game is already 8 years late, I imagine. Oh, it feels to me like he's just more like he's like a streamer and he enjoys streaming, and he's not like ultra serious about like trying to launch this game on some time frame. Is my guess. I
want to slap you. How do you fix something you haven't seen before? Stop it. Literally part of the problem. God damn, dude. That's even funnier. You can see the comments. Some people can't see it. Some people can see it. It's not going to be up at the top. You're going to have to search for it because it only has 16 likes. And
Destiny, you can cut vegetables with a butter knife, but you'd still call the guy doing so retarded, no? It's not about whether or not cutting vegetables with a butter knife or a steak knife is good. It's about when the customer eats the food, can he tell what type of knife it's been cut with, right? Whether or not the chef uses a butter knife or a steak knife, right? Maybe using the butter knife is retarded, but by the time the customer gets the binary, the compiled program that he's like, working with, if it's cut, it's cut. He doesn't give a fuck what it's cut with, right?
I can't give you a direct link to it, so you can shadow ban people, yeah. When you ban somebody on YouTube, it does like weird, sneaky bullshit. It's called hiding them from the channel, which we don't really know what that does. So I wouldn't be surprised. So
Tiny is defending PirateSoftware. I'm not defending PirateSoftware. I don't know. He legitimately might have like dog shit, like practice and code, and it might actually really be bad. I don't know. I'm just saying. There's like this. Sometimes there's like this cringe. I don't even want to say this because I'm generalizing on so many things I have no experience with. And maybe Coding Jesus didn't do this at all. But like sometimes people will be like, we're doing a review of this guy's project. And what they'll do is they'll go through it and they'll be like, he didn't do all of these incredibly basic, really stringent things that are like maybe considered like best practice always. But in reality, like in any huge project or in any single project, like there are some things where people shortcut them and they abandon certain practices like, fuck this, I don't care, whatever. And then somebody will go through and be hypercritical But maybe that's not what happened here. Maybe his criticisms were general and good. But it's hard to say. It's hard for me to tell as well because the Coding Jesus guy interspersed a lot of personal criticism of Thor, and it's obvious that like his code review was kind of like spite driven. And it's like, well, is that?
Or by newest, and it's around 5 hours ago. Okay. Either way, video's dumb. Dude probably should have reached out instead of talking. Or I don't know, read the public docs for GameMaker. Wild, dude.
It's also, I feel dumb saying this now because he's said some of this, but now I don't know how true anything he's saying. But I also think it's a little bit, oh my God, I am so out of my bounds, okay? These are here. I'm so on heuristic level right now, intuitively driven, and I don't know, I could be completely wrong with this. But when somebody's like, I'm about to do a big code review of some guy, and I have a lot of experience with this, and they're like, here's this one particular language that I really like, that I've worked in and I've read books on, and it's like, is that even the language that this other dude is like working in? Or like, why are we even citing to one specific language? Like, why not just like talk about project? I don't know. That feels like intuitively, that feels a little bit sussy baka, but maybe it's not. Maybe C++ is like, maybe that's like the ultimate ancient language that every other object-oriented program, I don't know. Maybe that's like the foundation for a whole bunch of current language. I don't know.
Was it the CJ dude? Yeah. Like I said, you're going to see a whole lot of people on YouTube trying to pick at me like piranhas to get their 15 minutes of fame. Yep. You make a link to it?
The big problem with his code being shitty is that he isn't able to make progress on the game. The game has been on Steam since 2018, and has been in development for around a decade now, which is an insane length for a project like this. He's took tens of thousands of dollars in 5 recent campaigns promising him. Shitty code can be a good approach for short-term games. Jesus' review is surface level, but it points out that he's a fraud. But you're wrong there. If you want to make that statement, then what you would show is you would say, like, here, this would be a criticism. You would say something like, look at how he's named these functions or aliases where he can't tell what this actual value is. And then you would say, now watch this in a stream. And maybe on a stream, Thor's like editing code is like, what was this again? I'm not sure. And he's got to like dig back through, other files. And he's like, oh, okay, it's this. And then he's got to go through and change something. You would show him like making errors or something because of bad practice. Or you would show him like up due to poor documentation. But if you can't demonstrate that, it could just be taking a long time because he focuses more on streaming now and he doesn't really care that much about finishing the project, and it's just kind of like a hobby thing that he's not like super invested in, or it's something that he was really invested in early on, but now like that's the project has gone on, it's like he doesn't care as much. But
you have to click on the little 6 hours edited. Aha. So that doesn't seem to do it. Oh, do I have to right click on this and then copy link address and then do that? Is that what does this? It does highlighted comment. There we go. Boop. There's my comment on it.
He continuously says it'll be out in months for 3 years. So yeah, but is that because of his bad coding practice, or is it just because he's not motivated to finish the project or doesn't care that much about it anymore?
Enjoy. And I also have a whole argument with a whole bunch of people in the replies in there so they can see what's going on with it. I talked them through the entire thing of why.
Wasn't the other point that there is no videos of him actually coding on stream though, so he can't do that? I mean, maybe he doesn't like to code on stream. I don't know if I would want to code on stream. Because like the reality is like coding, there's probably a billion different solutions for the same problem. And what's actually going to happen, and I'm not calling out Coding Jesus, because remember, I don't know all about this thing the other day, okay? Coding is a lot like, or having other people review your code, it seems a lot like talking to girls about like what you should do for dating, where like if you ask a girl, what do you think women like in men, they're going to just tell you the thing that they like personally or that they think they like. And so my guess is anytime you're doing any sort of like programming project and you're like, okay, I got to work on this, everybody in chat's going to be spamming the best way to do it. And the best way to do it is probably just going to be the one way that they've managed to do it in the past that they're familiar with. And then people are going to be fighting to the death on like every thing that you try to implement and every thing that you try. I don't know. That feels like it would literally be actual torture, like 10th circle of hell shit.
Why I did that all in an array, because that is not normal practice to do that, and it's specifically so that you guys can reverse engineer the game and solve the ARG. Sometimes doing bad practice has meaning, which is why I did it in that case, so that you guys could do those ARG components. And I've been saying that for years. The ARG solving community around the game.
Well, hold on. I can't believe I'm even having this conversation because I know this about this. Okay. There is no reason for you to follow coding conventions outside of what is objectively good in the situation when it's your own code. So that's probably not true. There's probably good reasons to follow convention, because if you do write in a very sloppy way, or you do retarded shit, what you probably don't want to be in is a situation where you put down a project because real life happens or other stuff is going on, and then you really want to pick something up, and then you go to open it and you start to like drool as your eyes glaze over and you're trying to look and you're like, I don't remember what the fuck I was even doing here. And then you'll end up spending a lot of time reworking something or being frustrated. And then after 30 minutes, you realize like, oh, this is why I had this. And it's just like, you don't want to be stuck in that area. So like good convention and good documentation doesn't just help other people. It also probably helps you if you're not single-mindedly fixated and focused on your one project. So
knows this. That's why it's done. So it's not a gotcha. It's just stupid. Yep. So anyway, enjoy.
Enjoy.
One of the
Somebody said, Dev here, GameMaker is even worse, as if you don't use its keywords like repeat, making a for loop will run slower, etc.
in the world do you sleep? I haven't slept since 9 a.m. yesterday. I've been working on Heartbound all day.
Wait, Heartbound, is that the game? Has it really been 8 years for this one game? Is that Billy being nitpicky even because he constantly overinflates his credentials when he has by all accounts an average coder at best? Hold on.
You're a hacker. Like that's where you like kind of start.
Actual hacker.
An actual hacker. Like
Yes,
not like
yes.
I'm a hacker type. No, you're an actual
That's not
hacker.
kidding.
You've
Yeah.
won.
Like an actual hacker.
Yeah.
Yeah, my last job was hacking power plants for the federal government. I worked for the United
Oh, wait, this is part of this. Okay, hold on.
Because literally anything would be better than this. What is up, guys? Coding Jesus here.
Wait, not this one.
What is up, guys? Coding Jesus here.
Did he transform into Jesus?
Code. All right.
Holy.
What is up, guys?
Okay, we put on the Chad filter. Jesus Christ.
Coding Jesus here. Guys, in today's video, I want to review the top contentions that not only PirateSoftware had, but a lot of his fanboys had with my video yesterday, in which I reviewed the code that he wrote for his game Heartbound. Now, while the video was a stunning success in terms of engagement, there was a couple of themes that kept repeating from detractors that I think are worth addressing in a separate video. So let's get into it. The first claim that I saw time and time again is that your code quality shouldn't matter if you're a solo game dev, and that code quality only somehow matters if you work in a team. Now,
While that I think is probably true, I do think that like the way that you respond to a thing probably influences how people will view it. Like I'm comparing to like Factorial. Like there are things in Factorial that I'm not proud of that I've done because I just want to like short-term patch a thing that I know the whole thing needs to be reworked. But like if somebody came up and they were like, bro, why the did you design this way? I'm not gonna be like, actually, if I use 6 long arm inserters and I didn't have access, actually it's the same thing and actually doesn't even really matter. I would go, yeah, that was some fucking crazy shit, but it works for now and I'll go back and I'll deal with it later. Or like, listen, I just needed to get, X amount of resource or whatever. I don't give a fuck about how, as long as it works, I don't give a fuck about it. It is a horrible design and it is an affront to God and all things on this green earth. And I don't give a fuck about it, right? That would be the response. But if you try to like ardently defend every bad practice that you engage in, that's probably a little bit more indicative that like something not okay is happening. It's like, well, hold on here, buddy.
you'd think that if you're working on a passion project, you'd be interested in holding yourself to the highest possible standard, since you can make your own decisions, free of any corporate timeline, and not subject to demands of other employees.
Again, I'm doing this so heuristically, but that just sounds very not true at all to me. Like if you're working on your own project, there's probably, I remember listening to the guy who made the game Dust. He did all the art and all the programming for it, and they got somebody else for the music. Kind of like the guy who did the Undertale game, Jesus. Although he did the music, the art, and the programming. That like when you're designing things on your own, you can actually engage in a little bit of bad practice because it's just you. You don't have to worry about some other dude working with your code or maintaining it or like, and you have the entire scope of the project and everything, ideally, right? Now, I mean, obviously things change, but just right here, it's like, listen, I know I can design this like, because I'm never fucking revisiting this bullshit again, okay? I don't need to expand. This is never gonna, I don't give a fuck if this, as long as it works, who cares, right? So I feel like the idea that, well, if it's just you on your own, then you will engage in the best practice ever, the most optimized practice. Like, is that always true? I don't know.
Of any corporate timeline and not subject to demands of other employees. They say this with such confidence as if poor code is not going to hold you back in your own development process and you're somehow impervious to the effects of your poor decisions as long as you make those bad decisions yourself. Usually when you work with a team, you can get away with poorer code because you won't need to deal with the consequences of that code as you pawn it off to somebody else and work on something totally separate.
Like, again, intuitively, that sounds super wrong because if it's just yourself, you can pass off whatever dog shit code you want. But if you're trying to, send something up the chain, I don't know what you say. It's not shipping it. It's not because somebody else is going to have to approve all of your merges or approve like adding to whatever branch or whatever bullshit you're working on. I think if you're constantly working with stuff and everybody has to run to you to ask what the fuck is going on here, my guess is you're probably not going to last very long. You're probably just going to get fired because nobody's going to want to work with you or your project manager or whoever the senior lead bullshit or whatever is going to be like, listen, you're done with this.
of that code as you pawn it off to somebody else and work on something totally separate. But as a solo developer,
Like, how often does that happen that you pawn off a project on somebody and then work on something totally separate? Like, aren't you generally working on similar stuff? Would be my assumption.
pawn it off
He's being ironic. Okay.
somebody else and work on something totally separate. But as a solo developer, you need to deal with and contend directly with all the trade-offs that you make as you make those decisions while you code your game or your project or your whatever. In other words, every decision you make will either make life easier for you or harder for you down the line.
Keeping with the factorial analogy, though, you have to admit that you do pay for too many mistakes with planning and accountability for extensibility. Yeah, but it just depends on what you're doing, right? Like sometimes in Factorio, and I imagine it's probably the same with any project, like the scope of a project might grow such that you're looking at some prior thing that you did that was maybe a little patchy and could be refactored to be more efficient, but you know down the line that whole implementation has to be tossed and you're gonna have to change it to something else. Now you could go back and stringently, clean up every single aspect of this thing, or you might have the wherewithal to know, like, listen, this whole like side thing, whatever, needs to be scrapped anyway. So as long as it works for now, it works for now, and then we'll go back and revisit it when we redo the whole thing. It would just probably depend on the particular thing,
As technical debt accumulates, you bear the entire burden of that debt, which slows down development. Now, for those of you who aren't technical debt is a term that refers to the extra work you're going to need to put in down the line because you currently made a decision that was not ideal.
Like, me, dude. Just reiterating for the 50 millionth time that I'm so outside of my zone, okay? Like tech debt, like how much this is going to come back to bite you in the ass versus, like, usually when... I think that if somebody is incurring tech debt in a project, it's not because they're choosing to engage in shit practice. It's probably because they're given a budget and they're given a certain amount of time to get something done. And there's only like so much you can do with so much time, and you don't have time to perfectly name and perfectly comment and perfectly double, triple space and indent everything. And you're like, listen, fuck it, we ship it. If it works, that's whatever. And I'm sure there's some level of tech debt that you accrue over time in doing that. But I don't think it's just a result of necessarily bad practice. It's a result of like budget and time. Like if everybody could make everything perfectly, I'm sure a lot of devs would want to, but you just don't always have the time to do it. And then again, often, like if I say often, I don't know that, but I mean, at some point, if you're going to end up redoing everything anyway, then fuck it, who cares?
So you are delivering something faster today, only to slow down future delivery tomorrow, the day after, the week after, the month after, etc.
Also, tech debt implies some expansion of scope or something like it could be that you do bad things that actually don't cost you in the future because you're literally just trying to ship one particular thing and you're never going to expand on it. You don't give a fuck as long as it works, right? But
it's kind of like a ball and chain that's tied around your leg, and every step you take forward, that ball grows and grows and grows, which decreases the velocity of your development. Now, the fact that Heartbound has taken over 8 years of development and is still in early access, despite the fact that the game took inspiration from Undertale, which took less time to make and provided more content, is a reflection of the fact that code quality is important.
Like this statement is just totally untrue unless he's actually citing examples. I don't believe it. You can't possibly know the answer to that. I bet there are a ton of dog shit practices that have resulted in incredibly quick projects being created. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who literally have comment paralysis who like perfectly meticulously maintain some project that has never been at any stage of completion ever because they just lose interest or lose passion or lose time to work on it or whatever. Like, I think you would have to, like I said before, you'd have to demonstrate that somewhere where he's like struggling to add something or struggling to identify something because he just can't figure something out in his code or whatever because he's like fucked up some practice. I don't think you can just look at something like, oh, I see what's taking you so long. It's because you're not using enough comments.
And it will stifle your development if you do not take it seriously. And it's kind of ironic because the same people that are trying to make excuses for poor code are the same people that actually play the game and are expecting features to be delivered. I don't care if his code's poor in the sense that it doesn't impact me directly. Yeah, I might care from a technical perspective to try to reconcile his game development experience or his game industry experience with who he claims to be and what he produces, but I'm not going to play his game. I don't care for his game. And the same people that do care for his game are the same people that say that it's okay for the game code to be slop when in fact they're waiting on those same features that require the game code to be clean in order to develop and do so quickly. Now, I think that my views here can really be summarized in a dialogue that I had with Quinthio when I jumped on his stream yesterday and talked a bit more about the video. The practices that he's employed so far are practices that I'd expect from somebody that watched
Hi, hello.
Yeah, I thought I'd just drop in and make a few comments because I'm actually coding as I'm watching your stream. So,
Oh boy.
so I'm not a professional coder. I program simulators for my physics research, but I've really fallen afoul by coding in a sloppy way and having to go back and figure out what the hell I was doing. So I guess it's a risk analysis of whether you're going to use the code in the future, but you often don't realize you're going to use the code in the future. So
yeah, that's right. That could be a thing, but like I'm sure there are people out there that have gotten bogged down in trying to have like the perfect structure and the perfect practice, everything from the very start of a project who have wasted a ton of time and then just like lost interest or whatever. Or you end up spending so much time on a particular thing, and then down the road somehow you figure out, oh my God, there was a different solution or implementation, and now I wasted all this time on this other thing. Where like I'm sure there are like that. I mean, it's always a trade-off, right? I'm not saying that everybody should approach every project as sloppily and as horribly as possible, but
it's funny. Your analogy with your Factorio builds is actually spot on, because I watched what you were up to and I just kept destroying my factory and rebuilding it, and I barely got to any other planet. So I think the analogy follows through in terms of coding. Like you can spend ages trying to optimize it, you know, what classes should go where and that kind of thing, and never get a finished product. So there's definitely a balance, but it's not even about clean coding per se, at least from my perspective, if you're just coding for yourself. So we often work in small teams. In academia, you're often just reading your own code, but you need the commenting is kind of important, and it needs to be readable, and you need to be able to go back to it. And
if you're working with other people, yeah, for sure. But then the needs are a little bit different, right? Versus this is like,
even if you're working with yourself, because like in 5 years' time, you've forgotten everything. So you need to be able to go back and understand what you're doing, and then you can often hack old code and then use it again in the future. And it speeds up so much in the future. If you're building on weak foundations, it can become a bit of a nightmare. And I've done that myself, as I say, and I spent a lot of this semester having to recode my simulators, and they're running so slow because it's just built on this shoddy code. And
sure,
yeah, I mean, maybe
I mean, again, I'm not going to say like good practices should never be followed or whatever. It just feels like this is like an insanely in the weeds, pedantic like needling of the PirateSoftware stuff, but.
Yeah, well, I haven't looked at his code, to be fair, but
sure.
I don't think you have either. And you know, I don't know about this this Jesus guy. I mean, it's a bit of a humble name and all that, but yeah. So I just think there is an optimization problem. So that it can often be true, and often we code more sloppy than we really should for the optimization.
Sure.
Than coding a bit too much. It can happen. But it's a bit like, I mean, in Germany, I see this with road repair. Like they repair these small patches of road and then they have to keep coming back, and it's taking more time overall, more money overall than if they just repaired the roads properly in the first place. And I think a lot of that happens in coding. So I think it's a fair point to make. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I would assume that this guy is probably right in saying this.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I had to say. It's actually pretty late, so I should not stay on be on this. But yeah, cool.
I love you. Be careful. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
He just contradicted himself. Somebody donated $5. Undertale's source code is 1,000 times worse than anything Thor's code does. This is well known to game devs. At the end of the day, you have to ship, but it does reach a threshold where the pain of building outweighs the pain and time for refactoring. And someone else said, in construction, it's called chasing your mistakes. If the framer makes a small mistake, the drywallers have to compensate, and then the painters, and then the trim people, etc. Tiny mistakes become big ones. There you go.
On Academy for a week, not somebody that's been working on a project like video. The practices that he's employed so far are practices that I'd expect from somebody that watched Khan Academy for a week, not somebody that's been working on a project for 8 years, claims to, you know, worked at Blizzard and been around game devs, or at some certain points claimed that he's a game dev. If he just came and said, this is what I produced, I learned game dev for 1 or 2 weeks, Khan Academy, I spent an hour or two every day, I'd say that's actually good progress. But to come and claim that you're some like authority in the space, you know, this is the code you've produced, to me, there is a massive disconnect between what you say you're capable of based off your background and what you've produced. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think that really comes down to the heart of this critique of that claim. And that is that PirateSoftware is constantly portraying himself as a sort of expert authority on everything that's wrong about nothing, and uses all this hyperbolic language and associations when in reality, what he's tangibly produced is below what you'd expect from a junior developer or even an intern.
People call me the Bob Ross of programming, which I think is a pretty big honor because I like Bob Ross's stuff.
Here, for example, he didn't say directly, I'm Bob Ross.
Right. Oh my God.
He said, everybody thinks I'm Bob Ross of programming. What does that mean? It's trying to paint the picture that there's a broad consensus that you are the best developer out there and you are the go-to guy for anything related to game programming, which is his niche.
You're a hacker. Like that's where you like kind of start.
Actual hacker.
An actual hacker.
Yes.
Not like I'm a hacker. No, you're an actual hacker. You won.
Like an actual hacker. Yeah, my last job was hacking power plants for the federal government. I worked for the United States Department of Energy.
So do watch
You're an actual hacker. You won.
Like an actual hacker. Yeah, my last job was hacking power plants for the federal government. I worked for the United States Department of Energy.
So
I could be so fucking wrong here, and I don't do hacker cons or any of that bullshit. But in the very little I've seen, I feel like people who like are hackers, I feel like they don't usually describe themselves as such. Like hacking can encompass so many different types of things that like from the like incredibly sophisticated like reverse engineering of softwares to discover like incredibly sophisticated attack surfaces and like all the way to oh my God. If you try to go to PayPal on a Netscape browser, it actually serves you a really old page, and the password login that's only available here has no like two-factor authentication, right? And you found like an exploit, right? Like hacking can encompass so much shit that just to say that like somebody's a hacker, like technically, if you've ever looked over somebody's shoulder and like seen your sister or your brother's like password or like that arguably is like a form of hacking or gaining access to something you're not supposed to. Like it's a very broad term that doesn't really mean much. But
No, you're an actual hacker. You won.
Like an actual hacker. Yeah, my last job was hacking power plants for the federal government. I worked for the United States Department of Energy.
like hacking power plants for the federal government, what the fuck does that mean? That could be anything. And when somebody's very vague and broad, it makes me feel like you probably didn't do anything that impressive at all. But
So dude walks in with a laptop and a suit, and you lean over to, who's that guy? Oh, that's the hacker from the government.
Yeah, that's the hacker.
It's even we go in like 3 to 4 man teams, man. So like we've got a team of dudes looking like
You had like a team of dudes in suits,
wasn't
holding
just me.
laptops,
Yeah,
walking into
exactly.
restricted areas. Okay.
When he says things
like that, so my guess is he probably actually has very little experience doing any kind of like actual like penetration testing work, like any like hardcore, like ultra sophisticated software environment. That would be my guess, just listening to him describe that, because there are like a million cooler and more impressive things I think that you could say if you actually did something there. Like the way that he described it there makes it sound like he was like the guy who emailed back and forth between people to make sure that they showed up on time. That's what it sounds like with the way that he says that.
like this, what he's trying to paint in your mind as a viewer is that he's some sort of Unit 8200 Mossad agent writing zero-day exploits on USBs that are snuck into Iranian nuclear facilities.
Yeah, when he describes his role at HackerCon or whatever, he talks about social engineering, which again, and you have to be careful when you're attacking people, not to attack the other things. Social engineering and everything, that's a super legitimate vector for attack. It's arguably one of the most successful, it probably is the single most successful vector for gaining access to people's money, funds, or accounts or whatever else is social engineering. It's a huge component to, it's a huge part of gaining access to things, you know?
And
If there's like a database leak where a bunch of passwords get posted, but I know that somebody has like two-factor authentication, okay? And I'm like, okay, I got his password, I have his bank information, but I know he's got fucking two-factor for me, right? Okay, well, I know that like if I maybe you search the email address and maybe another database is leaked or whatever, you have his phone number. Okay, we have his phone number, we've got his login, email, and password. All right. You could like theoretically call the guy and socially engineer your way into the account, right? Hey, what's up? This is Wells Fargo. I just wanted to call you to bring to your attention that we are worried about a fraudulent purchase of your account for $480. And the guy was like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah, is your name XYZ? And you're like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, okay. And then you like type in, okay, here's his email, and then here's his password. Like, okay. And then you say, just to verify, sir, that I'm actually speaking with whatever, Wells Fargo is going to text you a verification code. Can you please read that to me over the phone to make sure that I'm talking to the legitimate account owner? And then you type, you enter the account. It does the two-factor on his phone, and then he reads it. He goes, oh yeah, the code you just sent me was 123456. And they're like, okay, thank you very much, right? And now you're in the account, right? That's a social engineering attack, really. And then using some leaked information. That's a super valid and a very easy and a very powerful way to get into people's accounts. And like, there's nothing like hacker, like I reverse engineer program the matrix or whatever, but like this is a super reliable way to get in. Like at the end of the day, the only thing that matters are results, you know?
and that infest and shut down.
Wasn't Stuxnet a social engineering hack? No, I think Stuxnet was a hardcore engineer that was like utilizing several 0 days in order to propagate that software throughout the entirety of the planet in order to get into the Iranian centrifuges. I think that was a much more intricate project.
USBs that are snuck into Iranian nuclear facilities and that infest and shut down the entire technical operation of that nuclear power plant. When in reality, if you look at his LinkedIn and reconcile it against his skill set, what he did was social engineering. He wrote phishing emails and tried to gain access to credentials and user systems that way. And so all this really culminates in the disconnect between who Thor plays himself up to be and then what he can produce. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that his GitHub is also totally empty. It's empty because he has nothing to show for his 20 years of experience as a veteran in the space. Now, Pirate himself also responded, and he got a bit hung up on the fact that my mouse had some variable highlighted, despite the fact that I never talked about that variable. It's actually quite funny because I refer to every variable other than the one that he referred to in his reply. But skipping over that, he makes the claim that you can't define a Boolean in GameMaker because...
Oh, people are saying that Stuxnet actually wasn't supposed to infect a ton of random shit. I thought the goal was to infect random shit on the internet until it got to the centrifuges. I could be correct on that. Never mind.
GameMaker itself doesn't have a native Boolean type in its scripting language. In other words, it interprets reals as Booleans. Now, to reconcile the fact that he used a Boolean in his code with what he said, I decided to do what any developer would do, and that is I consulted the documentation. So if you go to data types in GameMaker, well, look at that. You are also provided with constants, true and false, which can always be used in your code to prevent any issues, should the native Boolean type be defined later. So GML defines constants true as 1 and false as 0, and the documentation itself even recommends that you use true and false instead of reals in case that association between a Boolean and a real ever gets changed to a Boolean and some other native definition of a Boolean. So in other words, if they ever replace the aliasing of bools for reals with bools for actual bools, they recommend that you use true and false. But we know he's not going to concede on this point or admit the fact that he was wrong, given his track record. So let's move on to the next claim. Another comment that I've seen is that you've never worked with GameMaker, so you must not know what you're talking about. Another equally absurd variant of this is what he's writing is not C++, or anybody who has worked with technology or more than one programming language understands that languages are just toolkits. Each toolkit is uniquely positioned to solve a given problem. Now, while there might be unique features in every toolkit, essentially there's a lot of overlap.
Okay. So my understanding is that's kind of true. I just don't know why in the other video he's like, I've read so many books on C++. I don't know why he wouldn't have just said this here, you know?
Okay, an integer in one language is going to be very similar to an integer in another.
I feel like I would have had less issue, and I don't even know why I give a for this, if he would have just said, by the way, we're going to go ahead and look at what Pirate Software is working on. This guy claims to be an expert. Look at how dog shit this stuff is, instead of like calling it, you know, like it's code review time. Because it's like, well, we're not really doing code review. We're doing like spite code review. It's a different thing, you know?
Actually, there's a lot of overlap, okay? An integer in one language is going to be very similar to an integer in another. Every language is going to have for loops, etc., etc. So while the actual toolkit might be different, the same principles, patterns, and design decisions should apply in large part to any problem that you're trying to solve. The only difference...
His channel is based off code review. That's his shtick. Is it based off of doing code review of currently unpopular figures online? Or is it based off of doing code review of like how to improve yourself and get better at coding?
Says the tools that you use to solve that problem are going to be a little different. What does that look like in practice? Take that code snippet, alarm 0 equals 0, alarm 1 equals 0, alarm 2 equals 0. You don't need to copy and paste that code every single time. I'd expect an intern or somebody learning code in Khan Academy to copy and paste. You can simply replace that all with a for loop. So what does it say about somebody that they haven't even considered to use a for loop for something as simple as this? If there's something that I regret, it's not being able to provide more substantive feedback. If you look at plenty of my other videos where I do a code review, I go into line by line the GitHub repository and break it down for my viewers, both saying what went well and what didn't go well and how can it be improved. But Thor didn't give me, or really anybody, the chance to do that with his code because all he does is share snippets and screenshots. You also shouldn't be representing an entire entity made up of health, position, maybe whether they're dead or alive, their ID, their inventory as a number or an index.
Did they not have a for loop in GML? No, in GML they hadn't updated, so they were still stuck on 3 loops.
Into some array. That's not how you present character models or entities in game design. And I don't even need to be a game developer to understand that. I just watch 1 or 2 videos of the Cherno, and I already know that's the case. So hopefully you guys found this video informative or interesting. I'm going to now move on to other news. So unless anything new comes out that I think I can bring my unique perspective to, I'm going to put Pirate Software behind me and just keep moving forward. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Cheers.